We have one. Pretty Kirk. We're going to talk about the,
It was only,
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for putting up with me. Again, my name is Kurt Hepler. Along with me and Hamilton, we are the counsels from the Department of Consumer Affairs. My job is to inform you and a little bit of entertain you regarding the public, the Open Meeting Act. And I start by always saying this: when I crossed the 50-year-old threshold some years ago, not too many, but some years ago, I find myself putting my car keys in the same place every night. You know why that is? So I don't have to look for them in the morning, right? Because I'm losing a little bit of my acumen. So I thought to myself, what is an easy way that we can remember how the Open Meeting Act works without straining our brains too much? And I came with the Welcome to the World of Mnemonics, those little tools that help us remember things. Like if I would say to you, the colors of the light spectrum when bent by a prism, you would say Roy G. Biv, right? Yeah. Red, orange, yellow, blue, indigo, violet, and so on. So, if that yellow, I'm sorry. So I returned a little bit of that. The major planets of the solar system, again, my very educated mother just served us nachos. Right off the bat, I got to apologize to Pluto, because Pluto's not a planet, so I apologize, Pluto. So again, that's a way to help us remember things. The 7 continents, always eat an apple, scissors and Earth. Okay, Asia, Europe, Australia, and so on. If I ask you for the Great Lakes, the United States of America, you would say Holmes, Huron, Ontario, Michigan, Erie, and Superior, right? So I thought, I thought to myself, here we go for the mnemonic from part of the Open Meeting Act. This summer we're going to piano camp. I've had a few of them that I've tried to work still bit. By full disclosure, transparency, I tried to work the word optical in here. I tried to have a couple of instead of piano camp. I just could not get the optical. Maybe if they changed the act or I learned a little bit more, I can make the word optical fit. But I have to say it wasn't for lack of effort. So here we go. So P, the public has a right to attend. What do we deal in the Open Meetings Act? That very name, the Open Meetings Act. We do our business in public. So the public has a right. We have 3 rights. They can attend and they can record these meetings that we have. They have the right to comment on board actions, and they have the right to copy and inspect records associated with the meeting and its proceedings. Again, you are an instrumentality of the Board of Optometry and the statutorily created committee. Whatever applies to them applies to you with a couple slight differences I'll talk about in just a minute. So that's the P, the public. The Open Meeting Act stands for the proposition that board and committee decisions happen at board and committee meetings. So the I is for the internet. Just like this one we're talking about right now, these meetings are webcast. Thanks to Caesar, we increase in frequency, and plenty of people are watching. We get calls all the time, hey, that Kurt Hepler guy, what was he sleeping? Was he not paying attention? It's a historical record of the proceedings that never go away. And there's perception equal reality. But I mean, I say that sometimes if you're texting on your phone, if you're typing off your phone, if you're tending to nod off, all those people, they, like they did in some cases, say, I don't think that member, I don't think that board member, I don't think that committee member, I don't think that staff member, I don't think the executive officer was paying attention, was fully engaged in the meeting. So we just ask that you be cognizant of that because you're on TV. You know, maybe not broadcast frequency, maybe not the SPs with Peyton Manning, but you are on TV. The A, the agenda. So this is a brief and specific description of the matters to be considered. It's a roadmap. Basically, it has to pass the reasonability test. That is, if we read the agenda, will someone know reasonably what we're going to talk about? Again, so that's the reason. It's kind of like a roadmap. For those of you who come from the private sector, perhaps the nonprofit sector, we don't really allow things like old or new business or stuff we haven't thought about or continued stuff from last meeting or anything like that. It has to be brief, that's specific. And the general rule of thumb is, if it's not on the agenda, you're not talking about it. And we do have that. I didn't really have, like I think it was agenda item 2, public comment for items that are not on the agenda. If someone were to come up with something and say, hey, committee, I want you to tackle this issue or that issue, the only decision that the committee could make would be to put whether or not to put that agenda item on for the next meeting. So you don't take action on it, but you can determine whether you want to consider it. Okay? So again, it's a sword and a shield, with the reason being, if it's generally speaking, it's not on the agenda, you're not talking about it. Notice. And notice is kind of a big deal because it's posted at least 10 days in advance of the meeting. I think as Mr. Casella talked about, I saw Mr. Sieferman as well. There is an exception to that. There's actually two exceptions. One is an emergency meeting where catastrophe has happened. We have to call a meeting somewhat, if not very unlikely. But there are some exceptions to the 10-day rule, and one of those is to consider proposed legislation. At that point in time, we have to convene 48 hours notice. We have to tell the media about it, that we're going to have a meeting, and we have to make certain findings of necessity at the meeting, but it is doable. You notice what, so it's set forth the time and location of the meeting, as well as a contact person in the event more information is needed. And for a teleconference meeting, locations must be specified in the notice. These locations must be accessible to the public and ADA compliant. Let's talk about this for a second. I've had board members tell me, look, I want to be driving on Interstate 80 between Davis and Dixon at 3 o'clock, so I want you to put my notice there. That's where the notice location. That doesn't work. Why? Because there's no, unless you're saying, both, not running alongside that car, the opportunity to participate in the meeting. So it has to be a place that's fixed, that's ADA compliant. We can Google it if necessary. We can Google map it, the map list, so we can find that place. And the board member has to have the authorization to be there. Okay, it must be ADA compliant. You must have some kind of signage to notice that a meeting is going on, like we have here. One member told me one time, well, I'll just do it at Starbucks. And I said, well, how will we know that you're the board member holding the meeting? And she said, because I'll have a cellular phone. And if you've been to Starbucks recently, I think everybody has a cellular phone. So anyway, that didn't really work out. So that's the notice. It's kind of like, hey, we're having a meeting at this time, at this location. Right. So the O is for open session. And business is conducted in open session unless a closed session is operated by law. You really won't do this too much because you don't do discipline. But what's important is you could have a closed session as authorized by law if you graded tests. The Board of Optometry, when they evaluate the executive officer, that can be done in closed session. For those of you who are familiar, would be familiar with it, Mr. Casellas would be from your time on the board, when you consider disciplinary actions or licensing actions under the Administrative Procedure Act. But the last bullet is the most important, and that is because not because an item is controversial or embarrassing. We can't have a situation where we say, hey, the political heat, the media heat is too hot. We have to go talk about this in closed session because, hey, the eye is upon us. The eye of public scrutiny. And that's not a reason to go to closed session. It's not sufficient. We have to have a statutorily based reason to go into closed session. Communications, again, you substitute the word for committee. Here, committee decisions are made at committee board meetings. So committee meeting. So when a committee makes a decision, it happens at board meeting. You can't use a serial or daisy chain way of doing business. You can't start off with Anna, go down, and then that's the decision we made. Okay, those decisions happen at board meetings, at committee meetings. And the OMA does permit communication between a member of the state body and one other person, and that's called a briefing exception. You can tell somebody, hey, this is what we did at the meeting. Is what happened. But let me tell you about making some new friends. So sometimes a person will come to board meeting, or sometimes they'll contact you just because they Googled your name. And they'll say, hey, listen, I have got an application pending before the board. Or I'm going to be disciplined by the board, and I just want to tell you that I'm not really that bad of a person. It didn't happen that way. Disregard whatever you've heard about me. I'm telling you the truth right now. And those kinds of communications, if they fall the Administrative Procedure Act, which they would for Ms. Garcia, they would be prohibited. Sometimes it happens actually at a committee meeting or board meeting where somebody says, go to public comment, and somebody says something like, well, just to let you know that I'm, like I said, I have an application, I haven't heard anything in that little murder conviction, that really wasn't me, or whatever. And so you have to stop and say, I can't hear this because I'll be making a decision on that later. So when you have situations like that, please let your executive boss know. Please let either your counselors know what's going on there. At a meeting, we will automatically ask that person to stop talking and go talk to the executive officer, the chief of enforcement, or the chief of licensing, and not the committee members. And the power is vested in the body, not individual members. So a member of the committee can never say, well, if you bring this issue to the committee, I know how the committee's going to vote. Because you don't. The committee makes the decision. You can certainly record and relay that message, but you cannot state how the committee's going to. You can't make your position the committee's position. Ask your counsel. So get near the end. So if you have a question about any of the things I'm talking too fast or anything like that, please ask the question. I mean, not only today, I mean at any time. Anytime you want to ask us a question about how the OMA works, please do so. And perhaps the most important one is, what is a meeting? So it's complicated. I know that's not a TV show, but it is. It's complicated. And basically, it's any time you get together, the quorum gets together, the quorum takes one will be three, to hear, discuss, or take action, anything that would come under the jurisdiction of the state body. Okay, but no, committees and subcommittees need to be noticed and open to the public. So you have 4 members with a possibility of 5. That automatically tells you that anytime you do anything, we're in the realm of a publicly noticed meeting. That means we have to have the notice, we have to have the agenda, all that's going to be out there. Unless you have an advisory committee with less than 3 members without any delegated authority. That's not you. But sometimes the board will create a subcommittee of 2 folks to go study something. And those would be exempt from the Open Meetings Act, provided they have less than 3 members. Not 3 board members, just 3 members. So we call it the magic rule of 3. Okay? So, I know I'm talking fast. So the penalties, what happens if you disobey or you contravene the Open Meeting Act? Well, go from the bottom up. There's a criminal flavor to it. That's very rare. But what really happens is the top bullet, that the decision or action can be challenged and perhaps invalidated. And that's not a good look. You have a state agency, you're supposed to do your state agencies do their business in public. And the theory being that if something were to go wrong, you didn't have an agenda, you had an agenda out there for 7 days, but not 10, somebody could bring an action in the court of competent jurisdiction and challenge that action. So, a lot of information, really quick. I'll close by saying I do have some additional thoughts. So, let's go through these real quick. Teleconference meetings from the bottom up, we've already talked about. If you have a remote location, it's got to be accessible, got to have some signage, got to be able to be there. Can you find me now? That's the Google or MapQuest. We can't have a meeting, like I said, between Dixon and Davis and I-80. The technology is same but different. Sometimes in the open meeting statement, there's a statement made, hey, we have our computers open, we're following along to save resources. It's not that we're checking Facebook, it's not I'm trying to beat the solitary world record. It's in fact I'm trying to reduce resources by not carrying a lot of paper around. Okay? So you might want to consider when you open the meetings, site see 2, 3 people have their tablets or computers open. Might be worthwhile to make that statement. And the final thing is, it used to be in the old days, you could just say all those in favor say aye when you're taking a vote. And now each individual vote must be recorded. That way, the public can be assured that you're attending the meeting and participating because your vote will in fact be recorded. Whew. That's a lot of information in a short amount of time. Happy to answer any questions, comments, bad lawyer jokes, anything like that.
Members, I want to add a little more to the teleconference and putting that location on the agenda. we have been doing quite a few teleconferences, and we've been now starting to use WebEx. One thing to keep in mind is that those teleconference locations, wherever you're at, that has to be on the agenda. And if for some reason we get to the day of the board meeting and you aren't able to go to that location, that entire meeting cannot happen because that location that was publicly noticed is no longer accessible and or a board member is not there. So you wouldn't be able to say, you know what, I can't go to this location, but I'm going to send my husband there and he's going to keep it open. That wouldn't be something that we would be able to do because the public expects to have a board member there. The caveat to that is if we know that all the board members are going to be in Southern California, but we want to have, say Collier in Sacramento, so we're going to have a location open to the public just for stakeholders, and so we'll list on the agenda that it's for additional public participation, staff only, so the public knows that they're not to expect a board member there. So those are, I think, things that I think the board has some growing pains to learn those lessons, but those are all things that we'd like you to know up front, that if we put a location on there and you aren't able to go there, the whole meeting will be canceled and hopefully be scheduled.
Yeah. It's just something.
Yeah. So, is it? I'm wondering. Can I ask? So, like, I have my own optometrist, and when I was on the board of optometry, there were many, and so just asking a technical question about how something worked. I wasn't worried about violating the act, but can I ask? So, how does it work in practice? Do you send the order to a lab, and then they send it back, and then you put it on the person's face and measure it, or like?
Yeah, those kind of communications are totally permissible.
Okay.
Yeah,
Just they're within the subject matter of the board.
If you ask, I think it would be difficult for me to say that you're in the decision-making realm when you're seeking information. If you talk to one other person, I believe that's consistent with the provisions of the OMA.
And just be careful if you are, and not so much for this committee, but for board members, if you have a decision that's before you, and we sometimes do mail ballots, and you have this decision that you're trying to decide how to vote, and you would be able to call one member, but you wouldn't be able to call multiple professional members to talk about that decision that's before you.
But that's an APA matter. APA would be what was often talked about. Okay, well, thank you for putting up with me. And like I said, if you have a question at any time about anything, about the OMA, Ms. Hamilton, myself will be more than happy to answer your questions. Thanks.
Okay, well, now moving forward to agenda item number 7. That's where we get to prioritize. We've taken quite a bit. And I think earlier on in the session we talked that we wanted to talk about the application process and how there is severe attention on the agenda that we have talked about. So now I'm leaving it up to the committee to decide what would you like to put in order so we can start talking about it. And I think that Jessica, I sort of reached out to you and said, I'd like that emerging matters over the severe outreach that is needed for the application process along licensing and certification. That might be a good agenda item to address because it seems to be something that needs to be resolved pretty quickly. Maybe what agenda items that we should
Well, I agree with, on there's where the list of potential items are, the outreach was at the end before the severe outreach. No, it was another piece way before me.
Yeah, we had talked.
But it seems to me that number one, outreach, it sounds to me like might be our big, like an immediate problem in that we need to let the regulated community know they're regulated to begin with, like that very basic stuff. And then that will also help us do the rest of our responsibilities, because we need the regulated community, the stakeholders, to know that we exist so they can come and tell us and give us input on all these other items. And so it seems to me that that might be a good first step. And I don't know what we do about it, but that kind of seems to me like a big. We kind of have to do that before we do all the other stuff. And then I'll reiterate my comment from earlier today when we were talking about the notary requirement, for example, and if we square away that oath attestation issue, if there are other, maybe we can ask staff to come up with other low-hanging fruit with immediate impact that we can just recommend to the board to make the necessary changes immediately. I know sometimes, in the process, we need to do something in order to move it along. And so if there's anything we just need to get it to the board so they can say it was referred from the committee and then get it done. Let's just do all of those things so we can get them out of the way. Understanding that in the long term they may change as we come up with this. But my understanding, they took care of a lot of the stuff like the fees and those kind of things that we would have had to do. But if there's any leftovers like that, you can suggest us if there's anything we can act on today, or if not, then to help put together a list for the next meeting.
So the first thing you're recommending we work on the notary requirement would be a priority on the application.
Items like that, where it just takes us to make the recommendation to the board.
I think that the notary requirement is something that the committee can make a recommendation to the board today to go to the August meeting. The others, we can go through and see if there's other things that we can streamline quickly and continue to the next committee meeting. So we can work on it, but definitely that notary requirement is something we can make a recommendation to.
So do we have to vote on that, or?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're
Sorry.
ready to
Yes, I was just thinking. So, just that you have a list, because we have a notary thing, we have a comment about whether the usury customer practice under the so-called unlicensed activity exemption, whether that should be defined. So we have all those things. So the first thing I have is the severe outreach followed by the notary process.
So I think though, with the notary, because it's not going to require any regulation or legislative change, that would be a recommended thing that the board just says we're going to change the policy to do that now versus the other things, the applications and the other things that are required, whether statute or regulation. I think that's what they're going to prioritize and bring to the board because that's going to take more time, more discussions versus just the notary requirement. So I think they're making two separate recommendations. Is that correct? The things that you can do now and then the rest of the stuff you're going to tackle.
Right.
Okay.
So is it at the point of it? Can I make a motion on the agenda?
Sure.
Okay. So my motion is that the committee recommend to the board to address the barrier of requiring notarization on registrations forms instead of using the attestation, which is used on the optometry form, provided counsel determines that it meets the oath requirement of the statute.
Do we have a second on that? Yes, sir. Is there any discussion?
I'll only ask this one question. Is and I think it was answered, there are no other notary requirements for any of Board of Optometry forms? So just, there are no other notary requirements for Board of Optometry forms?
No.
This is the only one.
Well, no, so there, for optometry side, there's no notary requirement. For the RDO side, every application has a notary requirement.
So we are actually asking for all of those forms to be switched over, correct?
Correct.
Any public comments? Do you need clarification of what we just went through?
It's always been that way.
I can't hear you comment. I'm sorry. Just be a little. Sorry.
When you become a dispensing optician, you do the notarization to the medical board, right? And that's always been.
Right, and what we're looking at is that really necessary, especially when now you can go online and you can apply online, you can renew online. What is the purpose of that notary, and is there a better way to do it? So for the optometrist, they don't have to go to get a notary. They can, there's an attestation statement, and they sign it, or they do the electronic version of it, and that is enough to hold up in court. And so if that is inadequate, then why are we making RDOs having to go through a different process? That's what we're looking at.
I really don't know what you just say there.
No, I'm just thinking as a layperson to reply, making the notary is what's the purpose of the notary? Just to verify who you are, that there's a second witness. So, I don't think it should be. Or is it going to make it easier for people to become opticians? Or you want to remove it, or you want to keep
And
it?
want to remove it.
To simplify the application process, because now a lot of it is online. So as opposed to having to print out something, get it notarized, and then send it in, you can check. I by oath am this person. Would
I
be
feel like that opens doors to like everyone can just become an optician.
Well, the theory is that I made the motion because we're not requiring it for optometrists. So for the doctors who have intimate contact with the patients, we don't require that. But for the optician, we would require it. It should be the same. Either way, either we can require it for optometrists or not require it for both.
And the contact lens dispensers, the spectacle lens dispensers, they are fingerprinted as well when we do a background check on them. So I mean, there are other mechanisms in place to make sure they are who they say they are.
I think this is a question of really standardization.
Yeah.
Standardization and bringing, the theory being that you want to, obligations of the board is that you license all qualifying applicants. And so this would, it seems a little incongruous in some ways to suggest that an oath, a notary is needed when these folks aren't going to have prescription authority for codeine and other things. But our optometrists who do just file the attestation of the other ones, I think. So this will remove a barrier to entry, hopefully accelerate the licensure process, and standardize it across the platform, I think is what we're shooting for, right?
Okay, so
Just because I didn't miss the earlier contact by notary, so there'll be no more notaries at all.
So the motion is to recommend to the board because it's a policy decision, so the board will make it. So the motion on the table is to address that barrier. And Bill, you had said just to address it as the formal recommendation to actually remove it.
No notary requirement.
and replace it with
Yeah, I think that's the
So it's just a very clear, require the memorization section.
Can I ask a follow-up? If this were to go through, and this were to upgrade technology, sorry, I'll be quiet. Is there also then the possibility, potential, that the obligation today to send in a physical check versus having an online credit card processing could also be there?
That was discussed earlier on as an agenda item to talk about. Credit card, check, method of payment, integrating that, something different, into the infamous police system. So that's a separate item.
Great.
But that's another good one.
Yeah, that seems like a
Right,
good
today,
quick
so-
Okay, we do have a motion on the table, though, so you're amending the motion, so you can.
Okay, so the motion is to recommend to the board that the notary requirements associated with the RDO program, is that broad enough? Be replaced with the attestation currently used by the Board of Optometry. Provided that council confirms that it's sufficient to meet the oath requirement of the statute.
So that's the amended motion. Klein, will you still second the amended motion?
I still second it for it. And I think Anna officially has the second.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Okay, so I'm gonna call roll vote.
Well, we just amended the motion, so we might want to just
Okay,
one
more
comment
discussion
again
on
for
that?
amending the motion.
Any comments on that? All right, so, oh, okay, do you like to vote? One, okay, and I'm aye.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Motion carries.
Yeah. Okay, so, we had talked about making, under the emerging matters severe outreach needed, and, there's a list of things of urgency that I think we could put as an agenda item for, the next committee meeting. And, I also want to recognize that other items that we talked about, processing of checks, credit cards, that would be another priority that we also want to put in there.
Yeah, so my question on that, Jessica, can we make a similar motion to, for the board to approve different types of payment receipt, or is that really a Breeze issue, or what's the limitation on?
Well, Breeze doesn't right now accept checks. It just doesn't. That's across the board. So not our board, but all of the DCA. So I'm not
their individual
sure.
license they got.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's much something that we can do. But if you want, the committee can say we want to address these items and just list them. And make it one motion, list all the items, and say these are the recommendations, and then put your priorities. And this is the top, so 1 through 20 is the list that we're doing.
Right, but I'm saying, is there something we can do about this payment issue today in the way we just feel like we did something about the notary issue?
I think that's more of a technical issue because right now they're able to submit all their information online and then mail in a check.
Right.
But it could be something as part of your list. It would be that staff's going to spend time on researching if there's a possibility. Because right now I'm not aware of it. But that's
So it's just gonna be on our list of things.
Don't you want to make that a priority then? You want to put that at top priority?
Well, I think we need to go through, get everything on the
Yeah,
list.
and then we can
Yeah.
prioritize.
Yeah.
So the outreach was one, the payment was another one. Could I bring up, and it's more for a discussion point, I don't know if it's actual priority, but education requirements or apprenticeship programs for this, for these licenses, the SLDs and the CLDs as a possibility. Looking long term and coming up with a process for education for those kind of licenses. Also, quickly, can we change the name of those to? Weren't you saying that there was a issue with the way that the terminology was being viewed by other?
Yeah, because you have, well, there's a couple. The difference between a registration and a license.
Right.
There's a perception that the registration is not required.
Right.
Versus license, you also have the term a spectacle lens dispenser and a contact lens dispenser.
Right.
They're not a registration to dispense.
Right.
So I think you can do just an overall goal is to look at, because there's other terminologies that are inconsistent throughout the statute, so an overall goal would be to just go through and do a sweep for consistency purposes. And just have
Updating
it-
terminology.
Yeah, I think that's yeah. That would be another thing that I think we should definitely look into.
Well, I think related to the education would then be the testing and how that would all work. When I don't know how much education we'll get. I learned apparently here there's a 10-month certificate program. I don't know, maybe I misheard, but just kind of we need to put all of that in context and determine is there going to be a specific education requirement and then test for that. But I would hope that we could be modern in our approach. That whether you do the state defensive driving course or you do online traffic school or city defensive driving training, it takes 3 hours for all three of them. They're all three pretty much the same, and they teach you everything you need to know about your driver's license, the rules, or at least the rules that are going to be on the test, and then you take the test. It seems that that might be an ultimate approach to use, to be as modern as we can in this and not be a barrier where it's going to cost people more money to maybe learn stuff that they
I think that maybe we should discuss the possibility of opening up the licensing and certification of RSLDs and RCLD to private optometry offices as well. That way consumers can feel that they have knowledgeable, trained, and licensed staff who are held accountable to their eyeglasses as well as contact lenses.
So are you referring to the dispensers, SLDs and CLDs, when they're going into optometrists and to find a way to allow that? Is that what you're referring to?
That way we can ensure that we have more trained individuals to help all of our patients. And it's not to make it more difficult for optometrists, it's just to ensure that for the longevity of their practices as well, but more for the protection of patients, so they feel that not just someone who got out of high school dispensed contact lens and accidentally read the prescription on the box wrong. Something like that.
Is that the same thing as requiring that those technicians that work at the optometry practice have the license?
The optometric assistants, are you referring to?
Yeah.
Assistant. I wouldn't say requiring. I know that that's kind of the gray area right now because a lot of them work under an optometrist license. But it's kind of like in an RDO setting where you have one licensed individual and any associate underneath them are working on the license. But optometrists, doctors come to see patients, they don't necessarily get to supervise their employees, and a lot of mistakes can be made, and it's just to make sure that there's always someone there who is licensed and understands how to do it.
So, because I hear two separate things. One with the optometrist is working under the optometrist, but then you also just referred to the situation where you have the dispenser and you have multiple people being able to work under it. So that slide that I have about unregistered unlicensed people. So you're looking at making those people be dispensers as well as what we want to look at and have a discussion on. Is that
I think it's really, because I think we talked about this already, about the point of how wide does the scope of licensure go when you move into the private thing, private RDO, and whether those people are functioning under that, I'll call it exception rather than exemption. So I have it categorized as the scope of licensure, using the words even in the private realm area. So
I don't know if related to that is the portability issue. The idea of getting a license and then being able to go from place to place, even without a godfather, whoever, the overseer, whatever it is that you have to work for in order to renew or have one.
The overall ordeal.
Yeah, so you could
Decouple.
decouple it, so you could just be a dispenser, an RDO, and
So you could essentially register a salesman without getting an RDO. Can I get that right? Could you register the person without necessarily coupling it with the RDO?
right, and then that
Yeah.
person could get with.
Yeah.
But the idea that you could be what's the initial SDL? SLD, and then leave and go work for an optometrist, and still be an SLD. And that might step on some people's toes or whatever. But the idea that if you are licensed and trained in that, it should be a skill and a useful occupation and profession that you can move around and shop around.
It adds to mobility, easier career.
So, sorry, but to put something on what you just said, only because I worked at hospital optical, one of the issues we came across with is the fact that you were within the 3-year span as you were hired as an optician. Fortunately, I had my certification. It took me forever to apply for the license because I'm like, oh, I gotta get a notary and I gotta do all this stuff, right? So I kind of understand now where does it all go. But the interesting thing is, Costco put a recommendation that they want all opticians in their little islands, optical islands, to be ABO and NCLB certified. They give you 3 years. So yeah, you do get a lot of novices coming in, okay? You don't get a lot of skilled opticians coming in. So they'll, let's say a lot of them came from their college and they come in and it's like, this is their first experience coming in. So I kind of in my mind thinking, yeah, how come there's no interning or there's like an internship program or something that will help those students come from this kind of program and then follow through and fluidity to go, because many of the ACC students that I came across at Costco or anywhere will be like, oh yeah, I didn't take the ABO yet, or oh yeah, like I didn't do that because, and then they're like trying to find a job, and they're never ever applying, and they're never getting themselves licensed, they're never getting the ABO, they're just lagging on it. So I saw that, and then the other issue is with the NCLE, I failed twice that NCLE, and I'm working at Costco, so now time is up on me, so Costco can get rid of me, and they did. Because I didn't pass the NCLE. But then they can go and hire another non-licensed person to come in and start from scratch again. So then it's affecting consumers because they're expecting an experienced person like myself. The problem I see is that optometric centers, like the little cops, the optometrist offices, all those girls, everything you're tested on the NCLE, they're actually doing license. And they're forcing us to be licensed when all we're doing is taking the prescription, entering it in, and dispensing it. So it's kind of like it's a little lopsided in the sense of like, I get Costco has high standards and requirements, and it's really, really good because it's pushing you. But then it's like here you have these optometrists, and we have all these girls, and they're working, and they're doing everything that NCLE is requiring, and they're not even licensed for it.
Well, that's what we're putting it in the agenda, and we have a lot more discussion about that.
So that I'm just
The issue before this board right now, what do you want,
What do you want to talk about?
exactly, what do you want to get authorization to talk about?
Right, yeah.
So far, I've done outreach, payment methodology, educational requirements, testing requirements, updating the terminology, kind of the scope of licensure, and then finally the valid mobility or decoupling issues. So those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 so far.
I have one other two that I always wanted is after all this, I think we should talk about required continuing education credits. That once you do get that license, you are required. We'll have a lot of discussion about that too. Did we put any agenda items on, because we need to work on some of the wording. It's so outdated, right? Maybe we should talk about putting that as an agenda item. I know that when that presentation was set and we were talking about all of the different wording that was so outdated.
Oh, right,
And
right.
that's something.
Oh, the terminology.
Yeah, that's the
We
thing
have-
that pretty much is updating the language so that I put back on the list that things that
That's number 4.
Okay.
I have another one. This is general, and maybe we already have authority to do it, but the whole idea of we're just going to ask the staff to do it, but going through the statutes on these points of inconsistency of where it might need to be cleaned up. I don't know if that's something the board's doing, or does that make sense?
Would that be under terminology?
No, I think that's more of a harmonizing the statutory scheme issue.
Would that be legislative?
Well, the committee could recommend to the board that you in fact take a look at that and perhaps direct staff to begin that process. And that's something you could recommend. It would be something necessarily that, unless the committee wanted to say, hey, we want, we'll, board, if you'll authorize it, we'll take first crack at doing that.
Do we have to say disciplinary guidelines and like the basics?
And enforcement?
Yeah.
Be another good item. Talk about enforcement.
Yeah, there's some things you have to talk about. So those that you have to talk about, and I think it's kind of where you're going to put that in there.
Right. Well, I assume that's a big deal for everybody, but I don't think we have to. We only have to review guidelines, and technically they don't exist, so we've done our obligation. But that might also be an affirmative grant of authority to create guidelines.
It is.
The way I read it, it is. So.
Are you talking about merging the statute and separately then talking about disciplinary and enforcement guidelines separately?
Separate.
Okay.
Separate.
Just wanted to make sure I understood that.
So under the strategic plan objective, it seems like we have at least everything listed in there. Because there are like licensing, examination, false regulations, enforcement, outreach. Is there anything else we'd like to list on the priority agenda items we want to review at the next meeting? Is it public? Have anything they'd like to add?
So.
Sorry. I don't know if I can add something to the forms or not. So everything goes to the store, and we're centralized in Ohio, and goes to other national chains. Is it possible, at one point, currently the medical board had a process where they could send it all to Ohio as well? As currently our registration renewals sometimes get lost at the store. And we would love to be able to have an alternative address for our renewals because our stores aren't always great at getting us the renewal form in a timely manner to our Ohio location where all of that work gets filled out and managed and all of that. So when you're looking at the form, is it possible to just update that piece so we can have an alternate address?
Yeah, so you're looking at an address of record versus a mailing address.
Correct.
Yeah, so that's something that we can do on the Bree side to do that. I don't think that requires any board intervention.
We are actually working on it.
Oh, okay, thanks.
I got a call yesterday that takes a call that great, that's awesome.
So on the presentation of the strategic plan objectives, it's obviously laid out quite thoughtfully here, a bunch of things. Can we just say to incorporate all of these things? And then we can prioritize from there. You know, I don't want us to have not said
The low passing rates of
about promoting Breeze's online renewal capability. You know, that's probably part of our outreach, but I don't, just so we don't miss that stuff. I mean, it all made sense when I read it. But those would be things that we would care about. And then that addresses the law and regulation issues.
I have 9, so I have outreach, payment methodology, educational requirement testing, obtaining terminology, scope of licensure that incorporates what happens if you go into the optometrist's office and function under that statutory scheme, decoupling of the license to the RDO, that's the mobility factor, required continuing education, harmonizing the statutes, and the strategic plan objectives. So I have 9.
So also, Bill had mentioned testing as well. Was that something?
Yeah.
Thank you.
And would we consider the apprenticeship element under education also?
Yes,
Is that okay?
that'd be a pathway to licensure kind of thing.
Great.
Also, members, one thing that we had mentioned in emerging matters is the ability for online spectacle lens dispensers. There's online contact lens dispensers, but not spectacle lens dispensers. And they call for the contact lens, it's called out-of-state contact lens dispenser. I think that's a little odd of how that structure is set up because you don't have an out-of-state optometrist. You don't have an out-of-state medical doctor because if they're providing service to California consumers, they have to have a California license. And so there could be a way to just put it under those registrations. If they're doing this in California, they have to have this one versus a non-resident contact lens dispenser. And then allowing some kind of avenue for dispensing spectacle lenses. I don't know if that's something that you want to consider just because it doesn't exist.
So that could that be broadly stated as addressing so-called out-of-state contact lenses and spectacle dispensers and standardization or whatever. But it sounds to me like that's going to require a statute to change.
So that's 10.
Nice round one.
And what are those items look about? Looking at the examination, correct?
Yeah, so just read again. So outreach, payment methodology, educational testing pathway requirements, obtaining terminology, the scope of licensure issue, the decoupling issue, required continuing education, harmonizing the statutory schemes, the strategic plan objectives, and out-of-state online dispensing issues. I don't know that the committee has to prioritize those. It could go to the board and say, here's the 10 things that we'd like to talk about. What say you, board? and then the board says you go for it on all 10, then the committee could continue to reconvene and then they could tackle which ones they wanted to tackle first.
My bet is we will be the most effective if we take on a task and accomplish it and move on to the next one, as opposed to having, essentially we have re-envisioned the regulation of RDOs is what our list is as a whole. But if we can focus on chunks, and then I think we'll be more successful, and it might be, the board might be more inclined to do something in particular sooner than later. But the truth is, the big picture issues are going to have to be. It's going to be about education, examination, and discipline. That's going to be what all of it be careful.
Okay, so any other comments?
Well, we'll need a motion from the committee.
Okay, does anyone want a motion about
Go ahead. No, I don't want to.
You know, okay, we'll help you.
So Kurt's really good at stating motions, he can make a recommendation. I'll go ahead and put it on the spot.
So if the committee so chooses, it could make a motion that in request from the board, the authorization to tackle the following subjects: outreach, payment methodology, educational testing pathway requirements, updating the terminology, the scope of licensure, the valid decoupling/mobility issue, required continuing education, harmonizing the statute, implementing the strategic plan objectives, and the out-of-state electronic dispensing issues.
Applications on the
Applications? I would just add that to the pathway issue, I think.
So that motion's been, we can take that motion.
Someone would have to say, I make that motion.
You want to say that?
That he's made a motion. Oh, I made a motion.
I'll second it.
All right, so we take a vote. Okay.
Yes.
Aye.
I see aye.
Members of the public, I presume you were all commented out there. Did you have anything you want to add? Okay, is that all right? No worries.
Sorry.
We're pretty informal.
Okay. All right, so then we've done that. Now we can go to the meeting calendar. And there is, at the end here, we normally meet on Fridays anyway. And so we're now the 14th. So I know that we have a quarterly board meeting coming up on the 24th. Would another committee meeting be too early to have it in August as well, maybe the end of August or the beginning of September? On Friday?
When's the optometry board meeting?
3rd and 4th of August. Does the 18th or the 25th seem too soon, or? No, that's the board of optometry will have a meeting. That's not for the committee, unless, that's for the board of optometry. So we have to have committee meetings, so we have to schedule them out to start tackling the agenda items. And so not looking to ask, if you want to start meeting in August, so you can start looking at these. And is it too soon to have like on the 18th and 25th? It doesn't seem like anything else is scheduled on those days.
My question is for Jessica. Do we expect something from the board besides, we agreed with your motion, you guys can work on that? Do you have a sense of that, or?
Of what they're gonna do?
Yeah, like, are we going to be able to hit the ground running on the 18th, or is it going to take more time to kind of develop what the approach of how we're going to handle things?
Well, I know that the board is very committed to letting you guys go and start the work. So I do anticipate that green light to go. But depending on the topic, if it requires a lot of staff resources, it might take a little longer. But you can go ahead and set the calendar, and then we'll try to get as many things as we can for those things so we can talk about what we're going to do. So I think that we can at least start with that meeting after we get the green light from the board.
It seems like we should probably have something in August, at least to even get started on the outreach element, which I'm assuming that's a no-brainer. So, like, at least talking about that simple issue and how to tackle it, get going on that, I think would be a good use of our time at the very least. And then there may be a couple other things that they approve that we can also tackle at that same meeting.
So does the 18th look good? Can we start to do that?
I hope it's more.
Yes. Does the 18th of August look good for you? Okay. So 15th first. Okay.
No, you can do them all.
I refuse.
So would you like that in Northern or Southern California? Or the Bay Area?
I'm down here, but once it's equally convenient to do it.
What? Now you're from the road.
But ultimately, in the spirit of outreach, we
Yeah,
should
we're
vary
going
our locations over the course of time anyway.
We should.
So we should get an order. For the 18th. Okay.
Separate.
All right. And,
It'll be nice and cool in August.
and,
Oh, yeah.
Wait.
Let's rethink this.
Hang on.
Let's rethink this. Hold on.
No, I heard second minute.
When does the state fair start? Oh, so we're gonna miss.
Okay, so in August, what's the next one?
okay, so August and, do you want to meet monthly or do you, because we can really look
It's
at
up to you,
this.
it's up to the committee.
That up to you. That-
Should we? Yeah.
Well, then it'll after August.
See,
How about,
when's
September.
22nd or 29th?
when's the next board meeting after?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. When would the next board meeting be for?
We use November 4th.
It's November 4th.
We have plenty of time to tackle these
Yeah.
things until the board meets. We're able to say, look, we've already.
So meet a couple times before that next meeting.
Yeah, we can meet August,
And then
September
September.
22nd. Bill, what is that for you?
That should be
There's no holidays or anything, right?
right.
Done.
So
I'm fine with the 22nd.
I'm fine with it. That's good. 22nd, okay, so September 22nd.
So, meeting
what was the
location.
August name?
August was August 18th. And where should we go? Want to do it somewhere?
I mean, we're gonna alternate, or do we? So, do we consider San Francisco a separate location from Sacramento?
We do, but
Yeah. The Bay Area.
So Bay Area.
That's
for
travel.
22nd.
What?
But you also want to, when you're thinking locations, you also want to keep costs in mind.
Right.
So if most of the people are in Sacramento, or all of you are in Southern California, to have a meeting in the Bay Area could be pretty costly.
Gotcha.
And also when you look at where, specifically you want to look at the most accessible, so something that's close to an airport or something that stakeholders can easily get to in a day. Those are all things to consider when you're thinking about meeting locations.
I mean, then why don't we just alternate?
Why don't
LA.
we do it then?
Yeah.
Okay, so the 22nd will be in Southern California.
You can always authorize the executive officer if you got a school location in Southern California, whether it be LAX,
Burbank.
Yeah, Burbank is good.
Burbank,
San
San
Diego.
Diego.
San Diego, finally got San Diego out here.
I go back to San Diego and
I
then,
like nothing is right. Well, I can come down.
so we have August, September, and you want to meet one more time before the board meets in November? You want to meet in October?
I think that would be ambitious.
Okay, so we
Just-
just have August.
Just to see, we're on a roll. We can always decide.
Let's have one more.
Let's do one more, but
the-
but if there's great potential to spin a lot of wheels on a lot of these big ideas, and we still don't even know. Say, oh, staff, can we get a white paper on what's going on in the 21 states that do regulate, and on the 27 that don't, and on the 3 that are in between, and like all of that to help inform our decisions.
Yeah.
But
Nobody make a motion.
in all seriousness, it's an extreme
Yeah.
from, they've never screwed up on giving me glasses, so why are we wasting time doing this for, to some states that are not hardcore on it. I will tell you that probably most consumers that were looking out for their safety have no clue the idea that that's a separate regulated profession. So,
We'll leave it to August and September.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wait, can we do for the rest of 2017? So we have November and December. So
Okay.
then after the board meeting, then
So-
we have a meeting.
So the board is going to meet on the 10th of November.
I believe it's the board.
The third.
It's the
Third,
third.
it's the third.
Okay, so how about the 17th of November?
well, now we're getting close to the
Thanksgiving,
Thanksgiving
yeah.
holidays.
Thanksgiving.
Oh, you want to do the 10th then? But the 10th is
That's a holiday
a
week as
holiday,
well.
yeah.
Veterans Day.
So we cannot meet on the 3rd in the board's meeting. We
Yeah.
cannot meet on the 10th.
Oh,
It would
in
be.
theory,
So,
can we ultimately do co-located meetings or joint meetings with the same Brown Act notice
Sure.
with the board and its committee
Yeah.
able to engage in their business as they.
well, wouldn't
So,
she needs to be in both?
Yeah, I need to be close.
Yeah.
Right, no, but they're I mean,
Good times.
the truth is our first meeting should be that kind of meeting where we actually all engage as a group and get a sense of what everybody's wants, because what they want is, they have the real voice essentially, and so I just don't know that that's a limitation that we can't do.
I'm sorry, are you talking about a teleconference meeting?
No, I'm saying that we have a chance to meet and have discussions on issues within our jurisdiction and within the board's jurisdiction in public without violating the Brown Act, where I can say, Sid, what do you think? What are your priorities? Where are you going with this? And we get a sense that the board really wants us to do that, and we say we can do that. And
Sure. We would have to, right, so we would notice that if you want to talk to the board, we'll notice it as a board meeting, because you want the board there.
right,
And then we'd also go kind of wrap and nestle in there this committee meeting so that everybody would know that the full-on committee is coming to the board to talk to the board. So we can certainly do that.
So that can happen on Thursday.
I'm not suggesting that we
That would be
necessarily, but it's in the realm. Like
You get a sense of direction.
Yeah.
And some feedback.
Feedback after
and what about their next meeting is
On November 3rd.
the 3rd?
Yeah. We have one.
Well, they have one in August, though.
Um,
Next week.
Is it, when is their August meeting?
Third,
Third.
third is
Third.
about, yeah, 2 weeks from now. That's, we're meeting now on 14th, so we've got to let the board meet on the 34th, and then we're gonna start meeting on the agenda items 18th of August, and then September the 22nd.
So,
We're not having a meeting in October.
so I guess my point is there a problem with us going on the third or the fourth, just one of those days to have the joint interaction and discussion with them?
Talking to his office.
Yeah, I don't,
Do you want it out?
I'm just brainstorming.
Yeah, well, it's okay.
So the draft agenda for the August 3rd board meeting is jam-packed right now.
That's fine, 2 days.
It's in review right now, and it's just slotted as far as for the recommendations from the committee. So I don't think we have time for the August 3rd board meeting, because it's a very full 2 days.
But we can meet on the November. The committee could meet on the November, or on the 3rd. So we're not gonna have any meetings in October.
Well,
Which is okay, because, November 3rd, right, first week. So we'll meet on September 22nd, and then we'll meet with the board on November 3rd. And then that'll give us a sense of what we need to do. And should we have another committee meeting, do we have meetings in December at all?
I'd like to make a
Sure.
observation.
Sure.
The dental board does some of their meetings the day before as subcommittees and the various members attend. So just knowing the optometry board agenda, what will likely come out of August 2nd or 3rd and 4th, but then spill over. And I don't mean to interrupt and interfere with business, but if you thought about maybe the afternoon of November 2nd as your meeting, but then making sure to include board members in that discussion, that's really, the dental board does all of their subcommittees the day before, so that all the board members can filter in and out to all of those discussions of that meeting. So, because I'm not speaking for them, I just know how packed those, and if you want meeting, if you want some discussion of just an observation, that maybe Thursday afternoon before.
We could have a meeting on the 2nd.
I don't know what you were achieving, I just was observing that.
You can certainly meet on, you can meet on the 2nd, you'd have to notice that as a meeting of the doc. And then if you want to bleed over into the 3rd or the 4th, then we have to notice that jointly as well. So it really depends on, really,
I'm talking about November 2nd.
Yeah, November.
Not August 2nd.
Right.
Okay, and 4th is Saturday, so November 4th is Saturday.
That would be good.
So we're saying November 2nd for our meeting, and then have them invite them to the meeting as well, or the
Yeah, so we invited you to the meeting, and then on the 4th, or on the 3rd, you can, anyway, yeah.
right?
When you have the doc, and then you invite the board to the doc meeting, it becomes a board meeting, and that'll have to be agendized as a board meeting versus a doc meeting. Right? I mean, the trade room there, so.
Second, the
Joint
quorum,
meeting.
and the second a quorum of the board shows up,
Then it's
it's
a
a
board
board.
meeting, right?
And Ruby's one, so.
Yeah, so. I think it's a good idea to start, consider people to progress
Well,
among.
It's premised that we have progress, and we don't know yet. We've had an organizational meeting, and
That'll connect us, and we know that we're on the path of what they're on.
Right.
I know we did board meeting, we walked through this thing. So can we do that, then, the November 2nd would be, do we need to have another meeting in December, because we finalize this, calendar? Do we want to meet in December, being that after we met with the board in November, we might be brainstorming?
Personally say no, just because that's insurance time, and that's when everyone's busy.
Yeah, I think-
I think Thanksgiving to Christmas is a tough time. I mean,
Okay, so we just stop there. Okay, perfect. Okay.
that gives us 4 meetings for the rest of the year.
So I didn't hear, I'm sorry about the November meeting, but it's
We're gonna want to have it on the second.
the DOC meeting.
Yeah. And then, join the board on, we're gonna invite the board members to come to that meeting in the second year. But that's what,
So then that would become a board meeting.
Well, and so really but the board's already decided the meeting that day.
No, that meeting the day after.
Oh, I see.
so we can still meet on
Well, No, but we should decide this at our meeting 30 days from now, which is going to be after the board has their meeting, and you can ask the board president how the board wants this interaction, because it's their thing, really. We're creating a meeting for them, right? And then,
But we can still have a meeting on the second. Just have it here.
So,
oh, that's a,
once we get a motion and a second to accept those days, then I can post them online so everybody knows when the days are, and then at the board meeting, as part of the motion includes asking the board how to do the joint meeting, if it's going to work with the second and the third.
Do I have a motion?
I have a question. So, could we agendize our meeting and the board agendize their meeting both for Thursday, and then less than a quorum shows up for their meeting of their body, but a quorum shows up for our body? We can still engage, our body can, but they can't take any action. But they can then, could they be there discussing, they couldn't discuss
Yeah,
the
so
subject.
if we posted something and we don't have quorum, essentially there's no action that we can do. In the old days, we used to recommend you could function as a subcommittee or subcommittee. We have sort of changed our analysis, and if you don't have a quorum, there's no action taken.
Right. No action, but what about discussion? No discussion.
No, nothing.
Really? It's not even
Not even a
file information, accepted and filed.
Not even a,
File the minutes, we can't act on
not
it.
even a conversation over a cup of coffee.
Wow.
So I think you're on the right track. One of the things you may want to do is, speaking as, I just don't want you to get overly optimistic and ambitious. You have a lot of meetings scheduled in a short amount of time. You have 10 tasks in front of you perhaps. It might be worthwhile to go a little bit incrementally, go to the one you have, go to the one you have. Coming out of the August 3rd and 4th meeting, you should get a good read on what the board thinks. If they energize you and say, drive it like you stole it, then you're meeting a lot.
So we can want to schedule that meeting for December 2nd. But then after that, I mean, the rest of the year.
Right.
And that's free up there, so it doesn't affect all.
Right, but so like budget-wise, I don't like. Are we going to be able to have 6 meetings in a year? Because that's the pace, and right. And I know we want to go like gangbusters. We have a lot to do, but our list of 10 is it's probably an 8-year deal of entirely changing the profession and requiring people to have certain licenses that were grandfathered in, but other people don't think of it, who knows what. But
So budget-wise, it's a fiscal year, and so in December, January, or mid-fiscal year. But what I can do is at the next DOC meeting, I can have a budget item to where you see what is within the budget and decide from there how to proceed.
right, I think that's the way to go, because then we can pace it based on that. If we know we're going to have 4 meetings, we shouldn't have 3 in January and February and 1 in September.
Motion on that? All the dates that we have listed, that motion?
I make a motion that we meet on
August 18th.
August 18th, September 22nd, and November 2nd.
Yeah, second. 1 second. I'll second. Okay. Okay. So let's go and
Another public comment?
any other comment on that? Sorry.
Aye.
Aye.
All right, well, I think that we adjourn, unless there's any other comments, anything else we want to add? This is a very productive meeting.
Thank you, members.
Thank you.